So, you may want to know who were Swiss mercenaries. The Swiss mercenaries were soldiers of fortune that dominated the European battlefields in the late 15th century and early 16th century. We have news of the Swiss fighting in their particular way since the 14th century, but they really made their name as mercenaries during the Burgundian Wars around 1470. They owe their success on the battlefield mainly to the reintroduction of a very old tactical formation, the Phalanx. Every soldier was armed with a very long pike, up to 6 meters, was used with 2 hands, and they had just a light protection of a small armor plate and a small helmet. And they moved in a very dense formation, like a phalanx, very deep, sort of a moving fortress on the battlefield. In this way, they were able to defeat the weapon that actually dominated the battlefields of medieval Europe up that time, which was the heavy cavalry. They became successful as mercenaries also because they were readily available to fight whoever needed. Armed forces didn't need to hire a regiment from scratch. They could actually hire a fully formed military force ready to campaign for them. They were very effective on the battlefield, not only for their formation, but also because they had a dreadful reputation. They, for example, refused to take prisoners. They really hated the German Landsknechts. Every time they met on the battlefield, it was a very bloody affair. They hated the Landsknecht because they thought that they were a sort of parvenus, imitators of their style. In the late 15th century and early 16th century, they have been very effective. They scored a number of victories. Maybe the clearest one was Novara in 1513 during the Italian Wars. They became a centerpiece of many armies. I mean, the principal one was the French army. They were very particular, and they caused to the commanders some headaches because if they were not readily paid, they wouldn't desert piecemeal. An entire unit would go, and if the strategy of the commander was not of their liking, well, an entire unit would go. If their homeland was going to be attacked, they would go as a unit. If there was other Swiss mercenaries on the other side, they would probably, one of the two would probably go because they didn't want to cross the pikes. They were quite difficult to manage, but their efficiency on the battlefield actually justified it. Their internal organization was also particular because they used to see themselves as if they were a sort of a professional guild. The officers were elected, so they didn't have any particular power. They were supposed to represent the democratic view of all the soldiers, so they could be outvoted, for example. They had a very low percentage of officers among their ranks. Discipline was pretty much left to their ethos. They had a very strong esprit de corps. For example, the first man giving way and retreating or fleeing was expected to be put to death with nobody pretty much regretting it. Their weak point, and also the cause of their decline, was the fact that they never gave enough importance to firearms. Among the ranks, they used to have soldiers armed with halberds, which were useful for melees and fighting at close quarters, but they always had a very, very small percentage, if any, of soldiers armed with muskets or arquebuses. They simply didn't consider it particularly important. We have some mention of artillery coming together with the mercenaries, but again, we don't have any report of it behaving particularly effectively. So it was their lack of flexibility of adapting to the changing conditions of war that created their decline. Let's say that for the half of the 16th century, they were not as effective as they used to be.